And we are live. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. What is it, Tuesday? No, it's Wednesday, right? No, it's Tuesday. I can't remember.
It
Oh,
is
it's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. I'm on summer break, so I don't really realize what day it is as much as I would when I'm not on break. So everything's kind of just all jumbled with me. Here with me today, though, everybody, you're not interested about my date inability. Um, ProperGander TV, also known as Ronnie Cameron, yes,
That is
on
correct.
Ronnie Cameron on Twitter is with me today. His links are in the description down below if you want to check him out. We're just gonna be, shooting this shit, having a discussion. Actually, this all spawned from a Chaos 120 live stream a few weeks back while I was still at school. Ronnie, if you want to get into that or something, how exactly did you find my weird, obscure late night live stream on Saturday night?
Well, actually, I was following you before. I subscribed a couple months before. Back, you were on Andy Worski's show,
Yes.
debating that we was Kang's guy,
Oh my
and
gosh.
I thought you were great. I thought you articulated well. You seemed really intelligent. I was very shocked to find out how young you were. And man, it was just so hilarious when you started mimicking him and mocking him with the okay, all right, okay, okay, and he didn't even catch on.
No, he
It
didn't.
was cool. Andy Worski's sitting there like barely composing himself. The audience is just loving it. I'm sure you got a lot of fans after that one.
I did get an influx of subscribers. But the reason I did that debate was one, because I knew it was going to be a shit show, and I always love a good shit show, especially when I'm involved. Um, but like on the level that it doesn't personally affect me. So it's just kind of like a one and done type thing, which is why I didn't do anything else after that. Even when Radio One really, really well, he said he didn't want to do any more debates, but then he emailed me a few weeks after, and he's like, "If you want to set up another debate, I'm game." And I'm like, "Nope." And then I posted my 1 hour response video to him as the third part of the Was Kang's trilogy on my channel. If you want to check that out, it was my mic drop moment, if you can have one in 57 minutes.
Nice, nice.
I enjoyed making that. It was one of the more enjoyable videos to produce, especially when I got the chance to dress up quite literally as Egyptian Cleopatra, because I knew that would piss him off.
Yeah, yeah. I actually have a question for you based on that whole conversation.
Yeah.
In terms of like ethnicity or racial makeup, like how would you describe the Egyptians? Like I basically compare them to like a Middle Eastern, more Arabic type of ethnicity, but I don't know if I'm necessarily correct on that. I haven't thoroughly researched that. I just know that they're not the same as like sub-Saharan Africans, right?
Oh no, they are very different ethnically from their neighbors to the south, and that is because they are on the like precipice of trade routes through the Mediterranean. So the Nile River connects the not the heart of Africa, but a good portion of Africa with the rest of the world through the Mediterranean Sea, which is where a lot of trade routes have gotten not that gotten but have emerged or just been a thing for several thousands of years. So people all around the Mediterranean, even when they were doing their whole colonization thing, because believe it or not, the ancient Greco-Romans did engage in colonization as well, especially when their population density got too dense for them to actually sustain people on their respective shores. They started branching out, and they started branching out towards various areas within the Mediterranean, because that's where else are you gonna go except for maybe more inland. Of course, that's not the best option. By sea, they were a seafaring people, so they explored and they made colonies in various areas. If you look at ancient Greek mythology, you actually hear a lot about stories where there have been like foreign princesses. Io, if you're familiar with her story, she was impregnated by Zeus, and then turned into a cow, and then she migrated all the way down like the crest of not the crest, but the edge of the Mediterranean, and settled in Egypt, and then gave birth to her child. Stories like that, the ancient
Right.
stories tell a lot. They might be fiction, but they tell a lot about what people knew in history of their foreign neighbors to the south and to the north throughout the Mediterranean. So it's not far out to speculate that those in Egypt, especially in Egypt, because where else is the Nile located, would be more diverse a population than anyone to the south or even to the north, um,
So you would
in that
kind of
respect.
describe them as a mix of like a Greco-Roman, Middle Eastern type of people?
Well, they would have a combination of basically all cardinal directions in them because that is a major hub of activity in the ancient world, especially.
Right, right. What about in terms of like the origins of Egyptian civilizations, like right at the root of it, before you had the Romans or before you had like the Greeks or anything like that? How would you describe them ethnically?
Now, that is the one thing that I neglected to exactly go into further detail on in my research because most of I was under the impression that I was just debating radio with regards to the 18th dynasty and, maybe beyond that a little bit in terms of you know, maybe the 17th or maybe the 19th dynasty. So I didn't go all the way back and do as extensive research as I probably could have done, but my focus was just on defending the claims I made in my video. And because Egyptian history spans several thousands of years of generations of people invading and then, being conquered by different other nations,
Yeah, no,
it's
for
it's
sure.
kind of hard to quantify exactly where their origin is from, especially when you
Yeah,
have various migration patterns happening throughout that entire time period. You have to remember that Cleopatra, um, the birth of Cleopatra is a lot closer to like say our time than her birth was to the building of the Great Pyramids of Giza.
right.
That if that puts it into perspective for you,
Yeah,
hopefully that puts it into perspective for you. The
that is a good way
timeline
to describe it.
is extensive. So quantifying that or simplifying that in any way that, you know, is digestible, it would still take you forever, and a mountain of research. And I, I had what, like 3 weeks during the middle of midterm season to do that research. And then after that, I kind of just let it go because I was just like, I have better things to do with my time. So the research that I did do was more focused on the 18th dynasty and defending my video than it was on, finding the origins of Egyptians. So I'm probably not the most qualified person to ask about that. If you want a better opinion than mine, Seven Phoenician Seven, shout out to that channel. If you guys are not familiar, she's probably Radio One's biggest critic,
Okay.
and he's very familiar with her work. I would totally recommend that channel for a more in-depth analysis of Egyptian
Seven
history.
Venetian seven, is that
Yes,
like just the number seven at
yes,
the
just the number seven Phoenician and then seven.
Okay, wicked. Yeah, I will look into that. Just off the top of my head, I don't really think there is a definitive answer on that one. I'm not quite sure if, the jury's still out on the actual ethnic makeup of like the first Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
My best guess is that they would be close to some sort of Middle Eastern type of civilization because I believe Mesopotamia began slightly before Egypt. They didn't really grow to the level that Egypt did within both of their time frames. But I do believe Mesopotamia and the Sumerians were before, and they
Mm-hmm.
did have that kind of like trade route that you were talking about. So just off the top of my head, I would assume that they would have a closer lineage to them than Europeans because like the Greek and the Roman empires never really came onto the scene. They weren't expanding in the way that you were describing earlier due to the dense populations and whatnot, just imperialism. So I would assume that they would be most likely a Middle Eastern grouping, but I think it's fair to say that they are definitely not of a sub-Saharan African breed. They're clearly different than the common image that people have in their head of an African. Like it's kind of like calling Mexico or Mexicans North American. Technically, yeah,
Yeah,
it's in North America, but clearly they're different people than Canadians or Americans traditionally. And that's kind
agreed.
of how I describe Egypt to people that are like, well, Africa. They think about the Egyptian civilization and the Sphinx and the pyramids. Look at what Africans built. Well, no, that's kind of saying Mexicans built all the greatness of North America. There's a clear difference there.
And to that, I would say that because it was so long ago, and another one of the portions of my videos that I touched on was that because it's such ancient history, and we have so very little to actually go off of. Like it's not like we have the census data for
Yeah.
Egypt circa 2000 AD, whenever all of this was happened. We have to go off of very select few mummies who have preserved DNA that we can find, even, and that's not even a very large demographic of people. So what I want to get across is we can't know for sure exactly what the demographic makeup of ancient Egyptians was at the time. We can speculate, sure, based off of cave drawings and stuff, and based on those, we can verify that there are variations in skin tones, whether or not the darker shade is due to, you know, sun exposure, or whether it's because of genetic makeup. We can't know for sure because, like I said, we don't have all of the information on the table available to us. It's a shame that I have to remind people so often that ancient Egyptians didn't have Ancestry 123, or my ancestry websites to utilize for their genetic makeup to determine where it is they come from. It's one of those things. It's probably going to be a disputed thing for like the rest of all time for whatever reason, because it's so important, right?
Yeah, it's a big mystery, and I kind of like look working backwards and removing possibilities that don't seem to fit the narrative or don't fit the time frames. So I would say, okay, yeah, we can remove certain groups from the equation, and like I said before, removing South Africa because that's where the whole "we was Kangs" things come from. Is essentially blacks were these ruling class pharaohs long time ago, and the evil white man came down and disrupted that, and
Hmm.
that's just a myth. That's not true. So yeah, that I definitely found that video interesting. I didn't
Thank you.
really know too much on the topic. I did learn a lot by listening to you guys. I found that like, Radio One had some interesting things to say. His delivery was just atrocious.
It
Like he couldn't
was.
he couldn't stay focused. It seemed like he couldn't even really digest what you were saying. He just kind of kept going on and spewing out the things that he had kind of embedded into his brain. Despite that, though, I did kind of find some of the stuff that he was saying interesting. Like he did seem to know like some of like the pharaohs that fit into the different dynasties. So I
Yeah.
give him credit for that. But yeah, you totally annihilated him. You totally destroyed him. And
Thank you.
yeah, it definitely led me to following your channel.
I will say that so far my debate track record, having done Radio One and then not too far out, but more recently Amos Yee, I gotta find someone a little bit less um abhorrent in the debate sense to discuss these things with, because I'm not gonna lie, those were both shit shows.
Shit shows can be fun though, and
They
regardless, you
can.
still learn something through it.
Oh yeah, obviously.
But I think what you're getting at is you want a little bit more of like a high IQ opponent.
Uh, yes, actually. And the last two people that I've engaged with have been, I don't want to say the lowest of IQs, because they had their information altogether is being the proverbial, uh not proverbial, being the operative word there, because they had research, but not all of the research that they did was necessarily pointed and directing at the point that they were trying to make necessarily. Uh, that's it's a thing that happens a lot in the intellectual world, where you've interpreted data in a way that maybe not the best way.
Yeah, yeah. I find sometimes people lack just this intuitive type of intelligence. They may be able to just source information. They
Hmm.
have certain things that they just kind of spew out like muscle memory, but they
Yeah,
can't really go beyond that. And it's hard for them to kind of frame things in a way that is direct and relevant to the topic
yeah,
that you're covering. And I find that extremely frustrating. Sometimes I speak with people, they have a firm grip over the English language, well researched, but they don't seem to understand the main points of disagreement or where the true meat of the debate lies. And I find that's because they're lacking a bit of natural intuitive intelligence.
yeah. And then sometimes you get people in a debate setting that just won't fucking shut up and let you make a point before they interrupt you again. Oh my God. I experienced that quite a lot on the Amos Yee debate last week. It was a hot mess. Um,
What was that on your channel or was it on their channel?
no, that was on Andy Worski's channel again, the Kumite stream that
Oh,
they
you went on
did.
again.
Yeah, I did go on again, but it was for a completely it was I had 3 hours to prepare, unlike the last time where I had 3 weeks. 3 hours to prepare, and I had all I say all of his sources because midway through the debate he gives us a whole link of sketchy looking website source things. Um and they're all they're all studies done by the exact same person. Brian Rind, I think his name was. And this debate was all about pedophile activism. Me being on the nay, we shouldn't let kids fuck adults, and him being on the pro side of that. And I know, I said I didn't want to talk about this, but we're talking about debates, and I've only ever had 2 online, so I kind of like these are my only experiences. I have
Yeah,
to talk about them. I have no other choice.
absolutely. So what's his actual position? Like, why does he feel that it's okay to have sex with underage children, or why is it justifiable? Like, what's going on there?
Okay, so the way that I kind of see or not see, but interpreted Amos's position is that, um, well, to be honest, I think he's an absolute fucking troll, and that's the only reason why. But if I were to apply a thimbleful of, actual critical thought to maybe why, aside from the trolling, it'd probably be because he is just completely all for, he's the most toxic version of a libertarian, and I don't have any other word for it, where like nothing is fucking wrong, it's all on the table, everything is fair game. Basically anarchy, but
Mm,
the worst kind.
yeah, yeah,
And
hyper libertarian.
I don't I don't want to make libertarians out to be like the bad guys because there are libertarians out there, and I know quite a few. If I weren't so vehemently against strict labels, I'd probably identify more as a libertarian than anything. But there are libertarians out there that have a code of conduct like take no shit but do no harm kind of deal, which I can
Yes.
totally get on board with. But just hang on, just one moment. Thank you, the Batman, for the £5 donation. The We Was Kings Brigade also tried to say European civilization was originally black until it was stolen by white people. Yes, they do that. They're very interesting people, and they're very very outspoken. The comment section of that one video, that first video, was uh, it was cancerous for about 2 weeks. I will say that if you go back and look at it, people are still commenting on that. By the way.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Okay, so like, where's the theory there? Is that somehow these African tribes ventured up into Europe and taught, the ancient Greeks or the Romans? I don't know exactly when they're saying this enlightenment came from Africa, but what's the exact theory there? How do they explain that?
Basically, it's a form of mythology. If you look at the story of, I think it's Yakub, if I'm not mistaken, he essentially is and this was also something that happened in my comment section. But if you look at the story, the mythology behind Yakub, essentially, black people were the first people on the planet ever to
The
have ever
Makub.
existed. No, no. Is it Makub? I don't think so. Yakub is actually a historical figure, and I think he was the one that genetically created 5,000 years ago. Genetically, created white people, the first Caucasians, and apparently they were evil and horrible and the scum of the earth. White devils,
Were they
essentially.
created in Africa, or did he go up to Europe to create these people?
I can't remember exactly, but if you look it up, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, this sounds. I've never heard of it before. This is crazy.
Uh,
This is nuts. It's like some
he's got
Wakandan
he's
mythology or something.
Yeah, as Death Hirukin pointed out in chat, you mean Cube Lord of the Ballsack forehead. He does in all of the drawings I've seen. He has a ballsack forehead, quite literally. So if you know what a ballsack looks like from the back, That's what his forehead looks like.
You know what? I don't know what a ball sack looks like from the back. I haven't been in that position, Weebs, but I think I can use my imagination.
Okay, good. It's kind of like the little Y shape thing. Anyway,
Okay.
so he invented white people, genetically enhanced, not enhanced. He genetically engineered white people, and then they were too evil for everything, so they were banished to the caves, which is where you get cave beast from. Those lovely
Mm.
colloquial terms to describe white people.
See, you know what? I can understand them saying that, you know what, Europeans were more of like this hunter-gatherer type of people, and we were hairy, living in caves. We were all cold and kind of in these like suffering type of conditions. I can understand them making that argument that like, hey, yeah, Mesopotamia and Egypt came before white people, so
Mhm.
don't take ownership of civilization and all of the advancements throughout time. I can understand that argument, but to say that they created white people or that they came up and taught us how to wipe our ass or the various stupid things that I hear out of these wee whiz kangs things,
Mhm.
it's ridiculous. It's way more insulting than any of this stuff coming from the right, in my opinion.
Agreed. And there's also the school of thought that if a black person was the one who genetically engineered white people in the first place, then who is the onus on for all of the sufferings created by white people, for all of mankind? I mean, obviously, then it's black people who is to blame for such an abhorrent existing race. I mean, come on. Think a little bit more critically about your mythological fantasy stories. I think that this is only 50 years old if I'm not mistaken, maybe 60 years old. This whole mythology type thing. It's very very new religious belief. I don't even think it qualifies as religion. I think it's just uh, uh, recreationist history essentially.
Yeah, it's like a cult-like mentality.
Yeah.
It's designed to bring people into a certain belief that isn't based off of logic. It isn't based off of reason. It is definitely religious in essence, I guess. But it's kind of like Islam in that sense, where it's both. It's wrong to refer to Islam as just a cult. It's wrong to refer to it just as a political machine. At least this is my personal opinion. I don't know exactly where you fit into the whole Islamic question, but maybe we can get into that. What's your opinion of Islam? What's your opinion of fundamentalism, radicalism, moderatism? Do you have an opinion in general?
So, I can't speak on Islam without first addressing the whole religious thing, and my position on religion is in itself believe in whatever you want, so long as, and it comes with this big but, um, so long as you don't essentially harm other people in your belief system. And by harm, I mean, physically assault anybody in the name of your god, um, or prevent anyone from carrying out their inalienable rights because your god said so. And this goes for all religions. It's not a discriminatory perspective that I hold with regards to just Islam. But in Islam's case, I do believe that you can believe in whatever the Quran says, but practicing a lot of the things in both the Hadith and the Quran, I kind of draw the line at. So, like, no fucking and marrying little girls, please and thank you. That would be much appreciated if you don't do that. Um, I mean, you don't have to eat pork. No one's going to force you to eat pork. Although there was that one story where they had to do that in China very recently. I don't know if you see that, if you've seen that yet.
No, no, I haven't. What exactly has happened in China?
I guess for the citizenship, not test, but in order to, assimilate them fully, they had Muslims essentially eat pork to assimilate them to Chinese culture. I think it was Chinese culture. I can't remember
Wow.
specifically. I saw it in passing. So like don't directly take
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying there. But that's really interesting. I think that would be hmm. It seems like a petty thing, like, this is how we're gonna judge their loyalty if they can put that piece of pig in their mouth. But at the same time, I mean, fuck, what do you do? Do you ask them a bunch of questions? No, because you could have imams specifically training radicals how to respond to the vetting process that exists throughout various nations. So something like saying, are you willing to eat pig? Let's see how dedicated you are to your religion. That's an interesting test. I'm not sure I agree with it, but it's definitely interesting.
Hang on. Alexander Spasic said in chat they forced them to drink alcohol. Okay, so I think that may be what it was. Muslims blow up buses in Western China, but it's not reported in Western media. Oh wow. Okay, interesting.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah, that's a topic to look into.
yeah. Sorry, what was the question again? I got distracted
Oh
by
yeah,
that
well,
comment.
I was gonna just kind of elaborate more on Islam.
Mhm.
I definitely agree with you in terms of religion kind of being an oppressive force. It can be very dangerous. We want to kind of live in a secular society, regardless
Yeah.
if it's Christianity or Islam. But I view Islam as the black sheep of the religious family. I
Well, it
mean,
has yet to advance past the stages of, well, my religion is the king religion of all religions, so therefore all other people are the infidel types and must succumb to that or die type of feeling. Kind of like there were Christian dark ages. I'm not going to deny that. Obviously, people died because they wouldn't convert to Christianity. Have you seen the Inquisition? Have you these are historical facts that this has occurred. It's just it was a long time ago. The current threat to our society right now is obviously radical Islam, and I think that that needs to be the more main focus of what it is that we turn our gaze towards in terms of preventing the indoctrination and or not collapse of Western society, but the prevent uh, the hindering of Western society crumbling to the kind of ideals of becoming more Muslim centric in what it is that we want to focus on, if that makes any sense.
yeah, yeah. I think Islam is much more military or militant in nature. They're kind of conducting themselves the way that Christians were hundreds of years ago in terms of the mercenaries and really wanting to expand Christianity and have
Mhm,
that be kind of like the umbrella collective tribe that we all fit under. And I believe Islam is still very much in pursuit of that. They haven't given up the dream of kind of globalizing the world under Islam. They've
mhm,
never given it up. It's always been their goal. Where Christianity, Judaism, they've been more content with just setting up shop in different regions. Obviously, Israel's a great example. And yeah, there's some expansion, there's some imperialism. But by and large, I don't feel that Jews are trying to convert the world into Judaism. They're just taking
mm,
care of their people. And I feel Christians nowadays are not necessarily interested in going on these missions. You're seeing less and less of the street preachers. They just want to take care of their family. Where Islam, no, 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 they want to control the government. They want Sharia law. They are radicalizing clearly. I mean, the only religious group that is really committing any form of terrorist activity are Muslims. There's actually one study, I believe it was in 2015. They revealed that 85% of all terrorist activity can be traced back to just three or five different terrorist organizations in the Middle
mhm.
East. So that's not even all of the various terrorist organizations. That's just a handful of them, and 85% of all terrorist activity. So when people make the argument that all religions are dangerous and whatnot, yeah, historically I understand, but in modern times, in mine and your lifetime, uh, we're not going to expect to see Christians blowing themselves up and suicide attacks, or Jews going on rampage and knife attacks. This is coming from one specific group. And although I don't want to paint the entire Muslim community with one broad stroke,
Of
because I
course,
actually know some moderates. This
I
this
do
is a
as well.
this is a funny one for your viewers. One of my friends, her name is Isis, and her boyfriend is named Allah. Isis and Allah.
Oh, that's adorable.
Yeah,
Well,
two moderate Muslims is
oh,
hilarious.
it's just a few things I want to say. Isis is actually a Greek god as well as an Egyptian god, so it's kind of ironic that that's the name that they want to go with. But um, because the concept of a religious extremist group using the name of an ancient polytheistic god, as kind of the name of their organization is incredibly ironic to me.
Yeah, that's a really good point because Islam hates paganism. Like Muhammad,
Exactly.
those were his biggest enemies, right, when he was first starting. So
Hmm.
that's a really cool point.
But the other thing that I wanted to get across was Soul Statement said obesity is more of a threat to our society than Islam, and I will to some degree concur that yes, Islam is it's specifically with regards to the United States, not as much as of an issue because of the fact that we're so removed from the immigration that Europe has suffered from, but has been implemented has implemented in their societies, but also because when you come over to America, you're bombarded with all of this um, different stimuli. There's both anti-Muslim types, and then there's pro-Muslim types, and then there's a whole bunch of in-betweeners that are just like, live your life. This entire nation is a nation of people who just want to live their lives the way that they want to live their lives, according to all of their, constitutional rights, and nothing more, nothing less. There are very, very few, not very few, but not a lot of people actually give a shit enough to try to indoctrinate you. And I know it doesn't sound like it a lot in modern, media, because there's a very vocal minority out there trying to convert you to whatever ideology that they want. But a good majority of people just want to live their lives the way that they want to live their lives, removed from, you know, being told what to do. If
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying, and you had a gentleman on your show the last stream when I was discussing various issues about white nationalism, and he was saying, listen, if we look at the total amount of murders that take place, if we be real about this, we're talking about a very minute percentage of the black community that is going around and killing people or
Hmm.
committing these crimes.
Yeah.
So we're talking about something that is probably never actually going to affect you. We're
Yeah.
blowing things that okay, I can understand that point, and we can make the same argument with Muslims. Like it's only less than 0. What percent of
Exactly.
Muslims are going to go out and commit something. But we could look at it from the other way and examine the statistics in a different perspective and look at, okay, out of the total amount of crime committed, how much of that is being committed by blacks? Out of the total amount of terrorist activity, how much is that being uh, committed by Muslims?
Yeah.
And you can make a strong argument that okay, there's something very concerning, there's something problematic with these groups, right? To use a leftist term,
Oh yeah.
and you can use both ways of thinking to kind of put it into perspective. And then when
Hmm.
you challenge that with something like obesity or cancer or whatever, yeah, it can kind of seem a little silly to be worrying about something that only kills hundreds or thousands, and we have these other things that are killing millions. Um, the counter argument to that would be if you are obese, that's of your own doing. If you're in a shopping mall and you get blown up by a terrorist attack, that's not your responsibility. And the amount of pain and suffering that is caused by your friends and family, and how that, filters into so many different other political conversations, I don't think it's quite fair to make that comparison. I think it'd be more fair to compare it to like crime or something that is an external thing that comes into your sphere and
Yes.
affects you negatively.
That would definitely make more sense, and I completely concur with that argument as well. I just wanted to make that point that that's probably why, it's less of a, well, not pre early 2000s, but it is less of a focus nowadays than, say, black on black crime or gun control. Oh my gosh, gun control. That's a hot button issue nowadays, isn't it?
Where do you stand on that? As a Canadian, I'm kind of indifferent because we don't have this huge gun problem up here.
Oh,
However, the conservatives, we'll jump on anything we can do to
yeah.
paint a bad picture of the left. I'm just going to be honest, right?
Of
So you have a
course.
bunch of conservative Canadians that are like, "Oh my God, they're trying to take away our guns," and I'm like, "Dude, this has nothing to do with us specifically. Relax." But yeah, where do you stand on the whole gun debate issue?
Well, if my Twitter banner is any indication, I'm a big proponent of arming thyself and the Second Amendment, and I absolutely believe that we should have the right to defend ourselves. Of course, gun control is a thing. I support it, but to the level that the left is proposing, I'd say that's a tad extreme, not gonna lie, especially since so much of the gun control that they want, we already have. So
Yeah.
you're essentially being redundant in your requests, and I feel like we could spend our time better pursuing other avenues in order to stop such mass shootings, you know? Um,
Yep.
gun control is not going to be the answer because if someone really wants to kill a whole bunch of people, obviously they're going to find a way to do it, whether it be by gun or by acid attack or by truck attack or knife attack or whatever attack. You can always find a weapon. But it's the individuals we need to be focusing on. And for instance, with the Florida shooter, obviously there were warning signs. There were plenty of warning signs. There were a plethora of people who were like, "Yeah, this guy's totally going to be a school shooter." And just to preface everything, I'm not going to use the shooter's name. Any shooter's name ever on my channel. I hope Ronnie, you understand my position on
Yeah.
this. I feel like that almost glorifies the shooters in a sense. These are scum of the earth types that I absolutely do not want to give any recognition towards so as not to encourage any future copycat types because obviously that's another issue that we should be addressing in the media. The prevalence of seeing a shooter's face immediately after the fact because they want them views. They want it's a reward for those media companies to essentially glorify this shooter, whether or not they're covering it from the angle of completely neutral, or whether or not neutral in the respect that they're just covering it to cover it, or they're saying that they're mentally ill, or they're just saying that they're a complete monstrous jackass. It's irresponsible to publish the names and to publish the faces because then you have a record of that person and their history and everything out there for any potential other mass shooters to find and then use as inspiration for themselves to go on their own shooting spree. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
abhorrent.
I like what you said there. You have the whole issue of copycat killers that you got to be concerned about, and by kind of glorifying them, pumping those images out, that could definitely influence somebody to kind of replicate what somebody else has done. And in
Mhm.
terms of this insole movement and all these idiots that are going around, that's definitely happened.
And so,
Yeah, freaking, oh my God, what a pathetic group of just losers. You bring up another point there too with mental disease. I really think that's kind of at the core here with these mass shootings. I don't think it's, I talk to a lot of leftists that say it's toxic masculinity that is the real concern here. We shouldn't be painting mental disease with one broad stroke because mental disease isn't dangerous. Like, what are you talking about? Mental disease untreated in general is dangerous, it's harmful, it's negative. I understand there's a difference between someone with ADD and someone who with schizophrenia,
oh yeah, of
but
course,
nonetheless, I would say in general, mental disease unchecked, untreated, unself or externally diagnosed is far more dangerous than toxic masculinity. So that's an interesting conversation there. And one other thing that I want to add is I respect you not wanting to mention their names because it's along the same school of thought of like not wanting to glorify serial killers and give them these little taglines and these little nicknames, right? The media
hmm
doesn't do that anymore because it's kind of disrespectful to the victims,
it
and you're
is.
encouraging other people to be like, hey, you know what? My life sucks. I'm going to go out and kill a bunch of people and make a name for myself. And there are people out there who've done crazy things like that.
No, I will say that from the psychological perspective, looking at how people classify, how people choose to determine how their monster is made, whether or not be it toxic masculinity or mental illness. Here's the thing: people, if you're just going to blanket a term and then make it that one thing that you attribute all of this bad stuff to, um, we could take the same argument that you made about, Muslims and black and black crime and be like, oh, it's a very small percentage of the white male population that is actually going out and doing shootings, right? That's a thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's a very small portion of the population, so you can't make the argument. You cannot make that argument that it is white male toxic masculinity that is the root cause of this. No, obviously not. But on the other hand, like, we have people with mental illnesses out there. and the proportion of people with the specific type of mental illness that it takes to actually go to a place and mercilessly shoot a whole bunch of people is a very small portion of people with mental illnesses. Um, and I'm
Yeah,
not I'm
that's a
not
fair
on the up
comparison.
and up. I'm not on the up and up of what diagnosis is allotted to those people who would shoot up schools. I'm pretty sure it'd probably be a combination of, say, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and disassociative disorder as well. Because I'm thinking of the one anime killer person, the Danny Phantom killer. I don't want to say his name, but that's like the only thing that I can differentiate him from, because he was definitely not in it at all. But um
Lost the chain of thought.
no, I haven't lost the train of thought. I'm trying to figure out how to articulate my point further. The amount of people who are of that persuasion of mental disorder, you have to realize that not that's also a small percentage of people that are doing these things, because there are quite a few out there, people who are sociopathic or who have sociopathic tendencies, but only a select number of people choose to act on these disorders in such a way that it results in people dying. It's a very small amount of the population. And at a certain point, you have to acknowledge that it's probably not toxic masculinity. It's probably not even the disorders that we can blame. It's the individuals themselves that are making these specific decisions to go out and do that. Whatever has driven them to the conclusion that this is the only way, you have to you have to acknowledge that they made that decision of their own volition,
Right,
regardless
right.
of any stimulus that might have affected them. People every day make the decision not to kill people.
Yeah.
So when you've made that decision to kill somebody, the onus is on you and you alone. And you can't go out and attribute it to white, male, you know, ideology or whatever. You've decided that.
Right. And I think there's a lot of things that kind of filter into it. There's a lot of things that kind of create these types of killers or whatever. And I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of a father figure at home. It has to do with not having confidence, being resentful towards society. And if you throw in a mental illness, if you throw in school bullying into the equation, all of these things can be, like the straw that broke the camel's back. And it's
Yeah.
kind of unfair to just say, it's mental disease or it's any of these things. But if I had to break it down in terms of like, okay, what is the most concerning element here, what is the thing that we should be focusing on the most, I would say it's probably mental disease and lack of a father figure at home. I think any psychologist, anybody who studies the inner workings of families, they understand that it's very, very important, especially for young men, to have a strong male figure. And if they don't have one, it could lead to criminal behavior, it could lead to suicidal thoughts, depression, all sorts of different things. So yeah, it's not fair to just solely blame it on mental disease. And there are so many people, like you said, that suffer various forms of mental illness, and they never go out and act on it, so to say, right? And you said one other thing too that is really, really interesting, and that's you don't want to kind of excuse yourself. You don't want to eliminate the fact that we have free will, and whatever we do is of our own volition. Like we're not necessarily uh,
Slaves to our upbringing or slaves to
exactly,
our ideology or social
or DNA
influences.
or any of the things that make what we are. Like
Mhm.
we do things because we choose to, and to
Exactly.
just dump it on something else excuses it.
Exactly. I'm one of those types that believes in taking absolute full responsibility for your own actions in every sense of the word. I have trouble even being like, oh, I got sick because I just got sick. I usually attribute it to, oh, well, I didn't get enough sleep, or oh, I didn't drink enough water, or oh, I didn't eat enough vitamin C. Like I could have done things to absolutely have prevented getting sick or whatever. Even if you think that like, oh, outside things could have also made it so that it's impossible not to. But like if I get a cough or a cold or whatever, I'm probably going to, on some level, definitely take responsibility for having allowed myself to get sick. I know it's crazy, but that, and just to give you kind of a measure of how much I believe in taking responsibility for your own actions, that's kind of like the extreme limit of what
You're
I
based
think.
as fuck when it comes to being responsible and living a true kind of like existential life. I gotta say, man, that's cool. I love examples like that where it can kind of seem a little petty or funny, like at surface level, but
Yeah,
it's true. What you're saying there is very it's very interesting. It's even if I get sick, if something bad happens to me, I could have done something to change that from happening. You know, we can kind of set our own paths, and
exactly.
yeah, you don't want to be too hard on yourself though, right? You don't want to be like, oh
No, no,
gosh,
of course not.
I'm freaking loser because I got sick or something. But at the same time, you kind of weigh it all out, both sides. That's pretty cool.
There's a happy medium, obviously. Like, of course, if I'm gonna get sick and I've done all of these things, it whatever happens happens. But that doesn't mean that I can't also take action to kind of minimalize the amount of sick that I am. So, of course, drink lots of water, get lots of sleep, go to bed early, eat a lot of vitamin C to kind of shorten the longevity of that cold. And I know this is kind of like a really far off to the side topic that we're talking about, but I kind of attribute this whole mentality that I have. And I know I give him a lot of credit, but my dad is the exact same way, and I probably got a lot of it from him. This whole mentality of taking responsibility to a fault for one's own, shenanigans that one gets into. But at the same time, um, I had a mother that didn't do that at all. So I kind of saw both ends of like taking extreme responsibility and taking no responsibility. And I've come to a happy balance, I feel.
Yeah, yeah. Just off the top of my head there with what you're saying, I feel in general, if you're lacking a mother figure, you're kind of emotionally fragile. There's a part of you that hasn't been nurtured properly, and if you're missing a father figure, you're confused in life. You're not directed. You don't have that inner confidence that you need to get through. So I can kind of see that within you. Like you seem like a confident person. You seem strong. You seem like you definitely intelligent. You kind of have that like I guess like inner strength or what have you. But I also can kind of sense just like there's a little bit of sadness there. There's a little bit of something that maybe you could really use a hug every now and then or something. I don't know. I just intuitively this is just what I'm saying. Not that you're like depressed or anything like that, but just yeah. I don't know if I'm accurate or if I'm on the ball there at all. But
Well, I will say this: you absolutely do need both parents in your life, and I will also say this, that my life is not as much as it may seem from an outside perspective. Is not all bundles of happy dances, roses, and unicorn barf and shit. It has its moments where it's exactly that, but it has its low points as well, and a lot of that stems with the influx of responsibility that I've had to take being the daughter of a single father, because as you very well know, the eldest in a family usually has to kind of pick up the slack that the not their parent has left unattended. So if I could do it over, I'd probably wish for a mom that actually stayed here. Of course, I'd be a lot different, but um I probably wouldn't have I wouldn't have this whole aspect of taking responsibility when no one else is. I probably wouldn't have as strict principles as I do, because I was mostly raised by my dad, and he has a set of strict principles, and we're all very stubborn in this family. A
mhm.
lot would be different. I can actually kind of pinpoint specific areas that would be different if I only lived with my mother, or if I lived with both of my parents. It'd be a lot more interesting, to say the least. My childhood
Yeah.
would have been a lot weirder.
Yeah, yeah. Would you agree though that like traditionally a father kind of represents guidance,
Yes,
strength,
yes,
get your
absolutely.
shit together, and a mother needs to be there to
The
not
emotional
only
support mom person.
bam, yeah, right on, totally on the
Mhm.
same page there.
Exactly. They're two sides of they're complementary. The man and the women, and a lot of people don't like to talk about this because apparently women and men are completely the exact same. I'm being sarcastic, but they're equal, but they're not, you know, equitable in the sense that, you know, one's a Canadian currency, the other is American currency. They're both useful, but in different areas.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
if I were to give it a comparison, um, the mom is definitely good for the emotional stuff. The dad is definitely good for like the guidance and the giving you a purpose or a sense of responsibility or what have you. But separate the two, and you're only getting half of one coin. Whereas you need both in order to be a I'm not gonna say ideal human being because that would make me seem like a non-ideal human being. And let me say, I did have like that emotional support person in my life at different times, not as much as I probably should have, but you do need both coin sides to kind of be the ideal person or the best type of person that you could possibly ever be in a
Yeah,
sense.
like ideally, that would be the case. I would say for sure most children, even young adults, they're going to be better suited to have both parents. But hey, there's so many different things that come into our lives. We have so many different ways of kind of say compensating. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, and getting through and rising to be anything that you want.
Resilience.
There you
You're
go.
looking for resilience. There are absolutely, like, statistics show that yes, overwhelmingly children of divorced parents have all of these shortcomings and emotional instability things, feelings of abandonment and whatever. But then there are the percentage of children that you get in these scenarios that are the resilient types, and that's the actual term for them. And the resilient types, despite all of that shenanigans, because you know single parent households do have their own shortcomings, like I said. Despite all of the shenanigans that they have to go through, they've kind of pulled out very strongly, and it's kind of rare that it happens for in the same family twice to all of the kids. But in my family, it has actually worked out that way, and I feel like that is due to my father's very strong and very capable method of raising us, but also the fact that he didn't do it just by himself. He had a very strong family support system behind him, not with regards to my mother, but we have about 7 other people in the family that are absolutely willing to help us in that respect. Like at the drop of a hat, I have an aunt, I have an uncle, I have like 3 cousins, 2 grandparents that are always there or have always been there all my 20 years of life that are perfectly willing to step up where my mother has not and kind of take the reins or help out in a sense. And that's always been a thing,
That's
and it's been a good thing. So if you are going to raise a family by yourself and you're a single parent, definitely hopefully you have some sort of support system behind you to kind of assist in that respect.
Absolutely. It's wonderful that you had that kind of support by extended family,
Hmm.
other people, I guess, kind of picking up the slack, so to say. If you don't mind, I kind of want to just rewind just a little bit
Oh yeah,
back
no,
to
it's totally fine.
because we started talking about gun control, and then we
We
went into
did.
the school shootings, and then I went into incel, and it all of these.
Fatherless children and that being a
Exactly.
reason.
It's funny
So
to kind of trace it back, but yes,
yeah.
with gun control, basically, this kind of I'll just sum up my position on it. I totally agree with what you said before in terms of the more regulation, the more whatever it is that we put in place, it's just going to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. If you're a criminal,
Mhm.
you're going to go out and get a gun. It doesn't really matter what's going on with laws or policies. Secondly, I would say in terms of like AR-15s, the argument that I hear coming from the pro-gun side of things is that we need these guns in case our government comes after us, in case there's any form of government tyranny or whatever. My position on that is I just don't think it's realistic that an armed population could resist, some sort of government aggression towards its own population. I just don't think it's realistic to assume a bunch of people with AR-15s are going to do anything. And if we look at, just last 100 years, when was the last time someone used an AR-15 to defend themselves against the United States government? It's never happened. How many times have they used it to kill innocent people? A lot of times. So from that perspective, I just look at it like I just don't have a horse in that race. I don't care about AR-15s. Why does one really need one? Is it because it looks cool? Does it really have that much of an advantage when it comes to hunting? Can we just get rid of those and keep handguns? I'm not quite sure why
Well,
people are
here's
insistent on keeping the AR-15s.
I think the disconnect here is it's not that they're calling necessarily singularly for the ban of AR-15s. It's more so the ban on all semi-automatic weaponry, which assault weaponry, um, which if I've done a video about this, but if you look at what constitutes as a semi-automatic assault weapon, that's most firearms, or not most, but a good portion of firearms that dives into the shotgun area, that dives into the handgun area. So it's not just these big, massive military-looking guns. It's also various other um, guns that people just don't want to part with because um, the AR-15, and I'm not the biggest gun nut. I just like to shoot them. At some point, I will purchase my own firearm and enjoy them thoroughly. Trust me on that. But at the moment, I am not the most educated with regards to firearms. But from what I am aware of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, chat, the AR-15 is simply a style of gun, uh, not really a military gun in the sense that the military specifically uses them. It's just a style made to look like a military firearm, and I'm pretty sure. Uh, yeah, no, like I said, I'm not an expert, so I don't want to speak on anything that I'm not certain about.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, a lot of these topics that we're covering, I don't, I'm not thoroughly researched on, but I
Hmm.
really like sharing ideas. I like giving my opinions on things and kind of learning more as I go along. And with what I gather with the AR-15s is that the right is very concerned about that. They're very defensive when it comes to losing their AR-15s specifically. If I seen a bunch of videos talking about other types of guns that they were worried about losing, then I'd be like, okay, it seems like it's not just this one specific gun, but both from the left and the right, there's this huge debate about the AR-15. And I try to look at it from both perspectives. My argument against the left would be it doesn't matter if you take AR-15s out of people's hands. The crime levels, the crime rates are basically going to stay the same. Gang members are still going to get guns. You're not doing anything to really solve the problem. And then my argument to the right would be like, why do you care so much about defending your AR-15? What is so special about this gun that you feel it's going to protect you against the government or you need it to hunt with? If there's other guns, if there's others, it shouldn't really matter that much. So that's just kind of, to sum up where I stand on that.
Well, I would think that the hesitation comes from the same perspective of like hate speech in that respect. Compromising in any sense on one right in that respect is kind of like a step in the wrong direction of you know the government taking your rights and throwing them into the trash can. If you compromise on this one gun because, oh well, why not? I mean, we can. Then you might as well just throw out the whole Constitution because, oh, if you're just not going to allow hate speech, then what the fuck is the point of the First Amendment? If you're
The
just
slippery
not
slope.
gonna exactly the slippery slope argument, and I think that is what a big concern is for a lot of the people on the right, and why they don't want to give up the AR-15. Um,
That makes sense. I can understand that.
yeah.
That's totally reasonable. If that point was articulated more clearly, maybe amplified a little bit louder through all the other noise that surrounds this topic, I could look at it and be like, okay, that's why people are so fixated with this AR-15. Because I mean, Steven Crowder has videos on it. You can just type in AR-15 on YouTube, and you're gonna see tons of different opinions from both the left and the right on this. And I just
Mhm.
find it hilarious that it all comes down to one gun. And whether you're on the left or the right, if you get rid of this gun, it's not really going to change too much. But if the right is looking at it as like a symbol and applying the slippery slope argument, that makes a little bit more sense to me. I'm just going to ask your opinion on this because it's a curious topic, and I think a lot of people kind of vary on this. Do
Mhm.
you think that an armed population can defend itself against the state, against the government, against the military? Do you think it's possible that all these different militias that exist in the states, if they coordinated on some sort of level, or if the states declared war on themselves, a civil war type situation, do you think it's possible that people with semi-automatics could fight against tanks or
I think it's
airplanes?
entirely possible. Take the state of Texas, for example. Uh, they alone could probably. Well, they might not win, but they would make a hell of a lot of a dent in the National Guard's population if they chose to secede from the United States. And well, not that they would, but if they did, they would make a dent in the population with one, the amount of arms that they had and the dedication that those people have to uh, their state's sovereignty.
Mhm.
I think it has a lot to do with not just the amount of arms that you have, but the determination of the people behind those firearms that gives your cause a lot more weight, or your battle a lot more weight than
R
not.
Yeah, yeah. I forget who it was. I think it might have been a Japanese guy. Don't quote me on that, but some figure said, you never want to invade the American homeland because there's going to be a gun behind every blade of grass.
Mhm.
There's so many guns in the U.S. I believe there's a gun basically for every person, or it's close. It closely matches that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so I
the Batman brings up a good point in this scenario. How many military personnel would be fighting with the rebels? That's also a thing to consider. Because let's be honest, the United States military is not, as much as they would like you to believe, they are not of one single mind, and there are people who have more loyalty, not all, more loyalty to their family than they do to you know the United States, in that respect, or more loyalty to their home state than they do to the
exactly.
nation as a whole. If I were to be a little bit more descriptive, because pe- people are not a monolith, guys. I know I
Yeah.
say this a lot, but it's the truth.
I, I'm
You
re-
you can't just take a group of people and be like, "Oh yeah, they're definitely gonna fight with us because we want them to." If you're gonna take a group of soldiers and have them fight against their countrymen, whether or not they're rebels, you're gonna have loyalty issues no matter what. Of course, if you take them and fight them on foreign soil, it's not gonna be as hard to fight, or well, it might be, but depends on the reasons. It definitely depends on the reasons behind why you're fighting
that's
and who
fair.
you're fighting.
That's a totally fair argument to make, and that's actually what I was going to say next is that how many people in the military would refuse to fight? How many
Mhm.
different parts of the machine would just decide to dismantle themselves because they refuse to go against their state or their family or their church or whatever it is, like whatever binds them
Mhm.
to the people of the U.S. And I think that's a perfectly fair argument to make. I'm not quite sure what percentage of the military would do that. I mean, the U.S. military, the U.S. government, even corporations, they're capable of doing insanely evil things, and they have throughout time.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of people that will talk about, the United States government would never do that to its own people. They would never execute that. Well, those same people tend to believe that 9/11 was an inside job. So you can't really be so sure what the government is capable of doing. Look at the
Exactly.
things Putin has done. Look at the things plenty of nations have done. When things get dire, when shit hits the fan, you
Mhm.
don't know exactly what's going on. So for me, I like to treat this argument, I like to be open about it and discover both sides. And for anybody who is watching this video, anybody in the chat with this particular conversation, pretty much with most of the conversations we've been having, we're not really like hard pressed on any one side. We're more so just like d- delving into the topic itself and
Mhm.
just investigating and being intellectually curious about it as opposed to debating or trying to hammer down any one specific point.
Exactly, and I'm actually a lot more of a fan of this kind of a discussion in terms of what we is, just us two will get done or come to the conclusions of, than say in the debate setting where it's a competition. Whose side can be more right than the other. This is a lot more healthy, I feel, in that respect, in
Yeah, it's
terms of
been
whose opinion you're changing. If it's just the audience, then yeah, sure, go debate. If it's the person that you want to talk to, then yeah, sure, discussion is a little bit better.
my intention with my channel and with what I do is just to get people thinking, get them really changing their vision from just being in this like echo chamber, this kind of like linear type of way of looking at things, and just broadening their scope. And if you're challenging a view of your or opinion that you used to have, or you're challenging somebody else's, it's great. It's good. It's good to have debate. It's good to have discussion. In terms of, is it better to have like a friendly conversation or an intense like blood sport type debate? I think both of them have their usefulness. I think both of them add entertainment, they add education. There's a place for both of them. I think as long as the people involved understand the environment that they're getting themselves into, like watching you debate We Was Kangs. I thought that was a great mix of education, entertainment, and just
Yeah.
fun. There's got to be a place for those types of videos on the internet.
Obviously.
But then, yeah, this has been a great conversation too, and it's nice to just kind of put your guard down, not have to worry about being right or defending
Yeah.
a position, and just talking about it. So it's good to have a mix of both.
Yeah, I didn't have to come to this prepared at all. We just, sat down, have discussion. These are the kind of things that I actually do prefer, especially in more casual setting. I could sit here for hours and we just talk and shoot the shit and just whatever. Um, just because it's that type of a thing. Whereas if it's a debate, I'm just gonna be like, para, 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 para. No, no, no. Let me get my point out. Let me get my point out. I'm losing the audience, shit like that.
Yeah, yeah. And you always got to kind of frame things in a certain way because you're defending a position. You
Yeah,
can't leave yourself vulnerable in any sort of way, and you can't come across too agreeable because now
yeah,
you appear weak. And
exactly.
within a conversation like this, if you say something that I agree with that refutes something that I said a moment ago, I'm just going to be like, yeah, you know what? That makes perfect sense.
And that helps my point. 10 points for me.
Yeah.
It is what it is, though. There was something in the chat that I wanted to talk about. Just jet fuel doesn't melt. Dot dot dot. Oh, in terms of conspiracy theories, are there any particular ones that you find more fascinating than the other ones, or interesting in that respect?
I find the flat Earth debate absolutely like I don't that thing is just crazy. It is nuts. The one thing I will say about flat Earth debates is that the people going in trying to prove the flat Earthers wrong, which they obviously are,
Yeah.
they go into it not realizing that there's a lot of science behind their arguments.
Well, the flat earthers, from what I'm familiar with, they have a lot of this has been years and years and generations in the making of people. Like, here's the thing: they didn't automatically believe. Who was it? Galileo that proposed? No, hang on. Oh, my education is failing me right now. This is how you know I'm on break when I can't remember who the fuck proposed, round Earth theory. The church didn't believe anyone when they proposed that the world was circular rather than flat. And that's kind of left over from, you know, those many years. It's a very fringe population, but they've had many years and many different mathematicians to kind of prove it that the Earth is flat. And with any ideology, even gravity, I think gravity is fake. Because it's all just like it was Galileo. I'm the slime. Thank you. Okay, so it was Galileo that the church didn't believe, when he proposed it. So that's been many years in the making.
Well, I mean, they ancients knew that the Earth was a sphere. There was kind of like an intellectual dumbing down
Yeah.
at different points, and yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
like
didn't
even
know that.
like 6th century BC, they never really thought that we lived on a flat plane. Even the
I didn't
Vikings,
know that.
yeah, even the Vikings believed that we lived on a skull. Yeah, they believed it was some form of it was more like a dome that you could go around.
That's the Vikings for you.
They're badass. But, yeah, what I find is that there's a lot of, science, there's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of data involved in the flat earthers' arguments. And,
But yeah.
how many people really check out, like, atmospheric density or what conditions in the stratosphere are
Mhm.
or how the mechanisms behind flight? We don't know these things. So if you go into the debate just saying, "How could you be so dumb to believe the Earth is flat?" and they're busting out all of these points and
You start to think like, "Oh shit, is it flat?"
well, no,
Well,
not
no,
that.
of course you don't actually think that, but like,
It's just I can't help but notice that the debaters, the people on obviously the round earth side, they actually lose the debate, not because they're wrong, but they just fail to bring anything of value. So I want to
exactly.
see the flat earthers get smashed, but somebody has to go into the debate who actually knows about like say for instance, one of the arguments that the flat earthers make is that if the earth was really round, airplanes would constantly have to dip down as they're flying over continents, and otherwise they would just fly straight. into space, and no pilot is ever trained to dip their nose down. So what is going on there? The gyro is basically based off of pointing straight into the horizon, but if the Earth is spherical, there's going to be an amount of curvature per whatever miles. Now, this is something
Mhm.
me and you have never looked into. So how do you
Yeah,
really refute
never.
somebody on that point, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, that's why I find the flat Earth debate interesting. Is not that they're right, but you're going to end up learning things about science that you probably would have never cared about if you weren't looking at it through that entertaining lens. And same
Exactly.
thing with 9/11. Let's say the world that the towers came down through being smashed by two planes, and there was no inside job involved. You'll still probably learn something about the melting point of steel. You'll probably learn
Yeah.
various things. You know what I mean? So I think as long as you take conspiracy theories with a huge grain of salt, they're great. But if you
Yeah.
just dive into them blindly, senselessly, you could go down some really dark paths.
You could. And actually, I think to your point of, well, how do you like you go into these things having not ever debated them before? Uh, this kind of um not mimics, but this is also a thing that you come across when you're debating, for instance, Amos Yee and his pedophile activism. If you're not prepared for his um arguments on why your studies are invalid and my studies are real, then you're not going to have a fun time. For instance, one argument that he tends to make a lot is, oh, all of these studies, the methodology is wrong, based on the simple fact that they go into this study wise using negative type language, and so that automatically skews the results. So, in the sense that when they're asking you questions on the surveys, they ask you, oh, were you sexually assaulted as a child or what have you? And so that automatically apparently makes people think, oh, this is a horrible thing. But the point that he neglects to mention is that a lot of these surveys are taking place years and years and years after the fact of a child being sexually assaulted. So they've already had enough time to actually make up their minds on exactly how this experience affected them and how it did not affect them. So to make the argument that, well, the survey is skewing their opinion on what happened to them is kind of ridiculous, especially considering the gap in between when the event actually took place and when you're actually asking these people study wise.
Okay, is he actually suggesting that kids aren't necessarily experiencing any form of negativity? What's his argument specifically? I'm very confused.
Okay, so essentially his argument is that children um are being manipulated by society in the way that they view sexual assault to think it's bad, so thus it is bad, and that negatively affects them later on in life. Whereas if we weren't to associate negative connotation with sexual assault premature and prepubescently, they wouldn't have an issue with it.
So essentially, children have been brainwashed into thinking that sexual abuse is wrong.
Exactly. That's his argument. And if you look at it from a perspective of, well, here's the thing, um, if even if you look at it from like completely divorced from the perspective of, oh, like take the psychology out of it completely, take it out all the way. Um, Physically, and this is about to get a little bit more for the viewers. So if you're squeamish, you might want to turn out for a bit. But if you look at it physically from that aspect of it, young children, and he's got no age limit. So infants, like newborns and types, they're perfectly okay with consenting, whatever. But if you look at it from that perspective of, oh, well, anatomically, this will damage the child in some way, if you catch my drift. Um, the the Lego is too big for to fit into this slot. Do you understand?
I catch your drift.
Yeah, you catch my drift. That's obviously going to cause damage that society can't influence, honey. So check and fucking mate, boy.
Yeah, no, that's pretty gruesome. I just had an image there of that classic South Park episode where they try to get the pig and the elephant to mate.
hmm
Chef goes, "Oh, now I know how all those white girls feel." Hilarious.
uh, oh
That
boy,
episode probably came out before you were even born. That's crazy.
probably did.
Wow.
I am
Yeah,
only 20.
I am old. But no, that's crazy. So it's like he would argue that, I guess he would have to argue that if I give a child endless amounts of ice cream and they say they like it, that that means it's okay for the
They've
child.
consented to that and all of the ramifications that come along with that, despite the fact that said child can't or doesn't know anything about STDs, pregnancy, the effects that premature sex can have on the body. I mean, here's the thing: if you expose a child to sexual stimuli, and this is it sucks that we know this, but if you expose a child to prematurely to sexual stimuli in that respect, so essentially, and I hate to say this out loud because it hurts my everything to say it, but if you masturbate a child, if you do it or if you engage with them sexually at a young adolescent age, you are you're going to expedite the process of puberty for them. So they're going to achieve full sexual maturity at an earlier age, but maybe they're and I know you do grow as you get more into puberty, but before their prime, their physical prime, and when it should be that their natural progression takes place. That can be damaging in the sense that they can also have premature sex before, or not premature sex, but premature pregnancy before their body's even ready to handle it, and hence end up dying due to that premature pregnancy that has just taken place. So there are a whole bunch of physical aspects separated from the social and psychoanalytic aspects that Amos is solely looking at, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Thank you, Red6UA, for the $2. How do you feel about Crowder's Change My Mind series? If you had anything to add to the debate topic, that now would be the time, unless you want to pursue this question.
Yeah, we can continue with the question. For sure. I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah. Okay. So Crowder's Change My Mind series. I think it's actually pretty interesting, especially seeing the different opinions that come up um when he does go to like schools and does the Change My Mind series live with college students. You see how much they don't know. You see them engage in that respect, mostly respectfully, not all the time, but mostly respectfully. I do have a preference for when the kids kind of get all nasty and assholey to Crowder, but um to be honest, the instances where the children, not children, college students, because we're the same age, where the college students are like, yeah, I think I'll learn more about this, and then we can talk more. I think that that is just amazing, and Crowder's not always 100% on the mark, but I do think that it is amazing seeing people that are so confident in their own beliefs just be like, maybe I don't know as much about this as I think I do, because we've been taught to believe that our society, especially our generation, is the most bleh, narcissistic generation to date, or whatever. We're all so obsessed with ourselves, which means that we can't admit when we're wrong. And that's direct contradiction of that popular consensus that's taken place. And I think that's, from a psychological perspective, fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of brain dead zombies that have been completely indoctrinated into the post modernist Marxist situation that we see happening throughout the universities and the higher learning institutions throughout the Western world, pretty much. But I think Crowder does a great job of kind of going after the low hanging fruit. He does a great job of kind of appealing to normies, people who are more in the center. I'm very far right on the political spectrum, so to me, I can't really learn too much from listening to Crowder. I kind of, I've heard it
You
all
think it's
before.
redundant if you do?
Yeah. Yeah, unless it's
Essentially.
something like very specific, like if we want to go like right into like, gun control or AR-15s,
Hmm.
something that I'm not really that interested in, or it doesn't really affect me up here in my little Canadian sphere. But I did find it interesting that Crowder essentially got his ass handed to him by a young man named Yusuf. I don't know if you've seen the debate that he did live.
I don't
Um,
think so.
I did a
Um,
video on it. It's on my YouTube channel.
can you
Um,
send me a link? because
Yeah,
I'm not gonna remember after this because we still got like 40 minutes, so it's gonna be one
absolutely.
of those things that I just kind of like you mentioned, and I would be like, I'm interested, but I forget because I never go back to look
Yeah.
at
I
them.
appreciate the honesty. That was perfect.
I'm very
Um, but
blunt.
but yeah, he Crowder essentially just gets, in my opinion, he gets annihilated in the debate. And the most interesting aspect of it is not only does he lose, but he gets highly triggered, and he even physically postures up in front of Yusuf and tries to bully him. Crowder's a pretty big dude, right? Like,
Mhm.
especially if you're a young, skinny college kid.
Yeah.
And you're out there in a big crowd. And I like Crowder, don't get me wrong, but it really, really opened my eyes to the situation when he debated it live. It was a live stream. Um, he doesn't have time to edit anything out. He doesn't have time to say, okay, you know what, this whole debate here, I don't really like it. Let's go with another one. I know he
Mhm.
doesn't edit his prove me wrong or change my mind videos, but he can definitely select which interviews he puts up. And I
Yeah.
truly believe if this wasn't live with Yusuf, he probably wouldn't have put it up. So I encourage everybody to check that out. I will share you the link via Twitter.
All right, thank you. And then Nate, the volunteerist, said Ben Shapiro is a much better debater than Crowder, and that's obvious. That's a given. I mean, Ben Shapiro is an actual lawyer, so his entire career is based off of debating and arguing with people. So he has to be good at debating and has to be better at debating than Crowder is. Whereas Crowder is, um, I think he describes himself as a commentary comedian, right? If I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
mistaken.
he's definitely getting more into juicier, meatier topics, but he's an entertainer, I think, first and foremost.
Obviously. And that's probably why he gets so salty whenever he ends up losing a debate. It's because anything that makes him look bad is a reflection on his, ability to entertain.
That's it.
Because his viewers don't watch him to watch him get owned, they watch him to watch him own people. And so that's a direct, mm, infringement on what it is that he wants to appear as.
You know what? I agree, but everybody loves somebody who can leave themselves vulnerable. And I think if
Yes.
Crowder were to say, "Hey, you know what? This is the first time in history that somebody has slightly changed my mind." Big round of applause for Yusuf. He can kind of turn it around and now gain more believability, more humility, I guess. Just
Hmm.
we all make mistakes. We're all wrong sometimes. Just because you lost a debate doesn't mean you're wrong on the whole thing. And then
Exactly.
that could give other students more confidence and more comfortability to enter in if they are on the left. Because I think
Exactly.
there's a lot of idiots out there that will step into Crowder's domain, not even realize who this guy is, not even understanding he has millions of followers and this is a
Mhm.
huge channel. Because we do live in little bubbles and echo chambers.
Oh, we do, obviously.
And I think the people on the left that do know who Crowder is, they're like, why am I going to go on that? Why am I even going to bother to talk to him, right?
Yeah.
But if Crowder can actually show some material that um, makes him not look so great or shows that he lost a debate, they'd be like, okay, it's actually a fair platform. I'll enter into it. And the
Mhm.
final thing I'll say on that is I actually think it's best to debate people on a neutral channel because then you don't have to worry about how you look in front of your fans or preserving that image or worrying about views or any of that stuff. If you can do
Yeah.
it on a separate channel, I think that's the best place for it.
And when you say neutral, you mean, like, not with your fans or not with their fans, you mean, like, someone else who is not, you know, like, they don't there might be fan overlap, but not all of their fans like you, so it's not, like, an overwhelming number of people just kind of piling on, right?
And yes, unless they have some sort of track record of being an honest host or an honest moderator, despite the fact that they're somebody's friend. Like, I, I don't know. JF from Andy Worski, right?
Oh, yeah, familiar.
I don't like the guy. I went on the show. They completely trolled me. It was a bit of a disaster.
Oh, you
But I
went on
like
the show? I didn't know that.
Yeah, to talk about ethno-nationalism. See, I have a black
Ah,
girlfriend, or she's not white, but I
mhm,
describe myself as a white nationalist.
gotcha.
So I talked to JF a little bit, and he said, "Yeah, we'll bring you on the show. It sounds like a really interesting conversation. We're going to bring somebody else on who's really interested with IQ and how that affects relationships, disparity between IQ levels, and how that can factor into relationship
Mhm,
issues." So I went on the show. It was supposed to be just like a general chat. He was very, very vague with what was actually supposed to happen on the show, and I kept DMing him saying like, you know, let me know the setup. Am I debating somebody? What's going on? He's like, "Oh, just be casual." I go on and they're like, so is this Ronnie Cameron? Are you a troll? Do you not realize how your entire ideology doesn't make sense?" And it was just like they basically brought me on the show
Mm.
to troll me and to make fun of me or whatever. And I was very disappointed. And I
Well,
think,
I mean, if you want to have that conversation, we can have it here since you didn't get the chance to.
yeah, we can definitely open up that
Because
can of worms.
I do find ethno nationalism to be very interesting. I'm actually due for to be on Scarlet Inc.'s channel at some point in the next month to have that discussion about ethno states because they're interested in talking to me and seeing my perspective, and I'm interested in talking to them and seeing their perspective. And you say you have a not white girlfriend, so how does that exactly compare to your ideology in that respect, or not compare, but coincide with the ideology?
Well, I basically don't think we have to apply our worldview or our politics to our immediate surroundings. We don't necessarily have to incorporate into that
Hmm.
our personal life. There's
Well, I
always,
guess I
yeah.
should ask you, ideologically speaking, what do you define as white nationalist, essentially? Because I know there are different perspectives that people have on it, and I've grown accustomed to being surprised when talking
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah, most people associate white nationalism with white supremacy or KKK or something like that. Well, I guess normies. But no, white nationalism is essentially the belief that historically white nations should preserve their white European identity. We should preserve our culture. Race matters. Race is real. It is at the foundation of identity. Gender, age and race are basically the three things that we notice immediately when we speak to somebody, and
Hmm.
we belong to, I guess, different types of tribes or collective groupings, and race is definitely one of them. So I would define a white nationalist as somebody who believes white European built countries should maintain at least a 50% white identity, white population within those countries, and you also have to support nationalism as opposed to globalism. That's
Hmm.
basically the definition of a white nationalist, in my opinion.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people would say no, you have to go up to 90% or 85. I just look at it logically, like white nationalism. If you believe the nation should be mostly white, you're a white nationalist.
Okay.
Um,
And because this is the inevitable next question, what do you define as white? Because I
well, I
know
mean,
it is different for most white nationalists. It's not universal.
right, right. You can kind of break down the different races into different, categories. Some people say there are five races. Some people say there are seven, and there are some areas of subjectivity. Some of it is a little bit arbitrary. I'm not gonna lie. JF
Hmm.
from Andy Worski, he has a video titled "What Is Whiteness," and he also breaks down how genetic clustering can be analyzed, and we can actually determine people's race to a 94% accuracy just based on DNA alone. Now, with whiteness, I would include obviously the majority of European nations, if not all of them. I think it's very clear that British, English, French. I would include Italians and Greeks, obviously.
Hmm.
So it's actually not that obvious because some people would say no, Greeks aren't white. I think that's ridiculous. But anyways,
They're darker white.
yeah, yeah. Where
I
it starts.
actually have a Greek boyfriend, so.
Oh, right on. Nice. Yeah. Where it starts to get like a little gray and things start to get a little hazy, so to say, is you have places like, say, for instance, Turkey, Eastern European nations where it's hard to distinguish, are they white or are they Arab? Are they Middle Eastern?
So, like
And
the Balkans, the Slavs, all of those types.
I think the Slavs are totally white.
Okay, totally white. Gotcha.
In
So
my
I am allowed in the ethno state.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Squatting Slav TV, dude, I don't know if you've
Oh my god.
both
I
both
love his channel.
it's great. I interviewed him, last week, but I
Oh,
did
you
it kinda
did?
just like, yeah, he's a great
Nice.
guy. We're gonna try to build more of an alt-right movement here in Canada.
Oh, nice.
Give it more of a friendly, funny, but uncut face, because 'cause
Mhm.
we're definitely based, we're gonna tell it how it is, but at
Yeah,
the same time, we wanna put more of a friendly face on it.
gotcha.
Slightly lost my train of thought,
You were
when we
talking about how to determine who is white and who is not. We were
right.
talking about what is white.
Okay, so yeah, there's clear things like obviously British, French. No one would
Mhm.
argue that those things are white, and we can extend that beyond. There are some gray areas, and how I describe these gray areas, and I actually DM'd JF before, and he used my analogy in his next video. And because JF is a big brain, high IQ individual, it was actually very satisfying to see him do that. We can look at the races almost like a color spectrum. And red and orange are distinguishable from each other. We know this, but there is a point where they bleed together, and it's
Mhm.
hard to determine, is this color we're looking at red or is it orange? It has a mixture of the two, and now it's subjective. If someone looks at it and says, I think it's red, someone could look at it and say, I think it's orange. And scientists are actually interested in this. They've recently been able to distinguish green and blue from each other. And there
Yeah.
is a point where they meet and you can't really say what it is. So with humans and races, it's the same thing. If you take a mixed person who's half white, half black, they kind of look white, they kind of look black, or people in Eastern Europe, I believe it's subjective at that point. If you have a little bit of both, if you define as white, you have that freedom because I can't define it for you. My subjective opinion shouldn't trump your own, and how you define at that point is how you define. And I think that's the fairest way we could kind of break it down. And if you're a white Hungarian, or somebody who's kind of white or whatever, and you want in the ethno state and you identify as a white person, you're in.
Okay. So the next question that I'd like to ask you with regards to this is, so how do you sort of coincide the whole skin color aspect with the cultural aspect? Because I know a lot of what people find um disheartening about race mixing is the prevalence for certain races to act in a certain way, and I like to, not like to, but I prefer to, not prefer to, but typically I attribute that more to the cultures that these people have grown up in, because that's the way that the cultures are. So we're aware that most European nations aren't the same culturally speaking. There are a lot of differences in that respect. So how do you kind of reconcile that?
Right,
Or
right.
like, does culture matter more so, or cultural norms matter more so than skin shade or tone in that regard?
I will say this. I do believe culture matters more than race, but race is a part of culture.
Yes,
The
obviously.
two
But
are connected. So to put it simply, I would get along much more with a black person who acts quote unquote white than a white guy who acts like a thug, a typical wigger. So
mhm,
in that sense, I can look at it and be like, yes, culture is the thing that matters most. But when we look at large numbers, we typically see that white people act and behave a certain way, and we can identify that as whiteness or white culture. And we can do the same thing with blacks. A black in America is distinguishable from a white in America. He has a different history. He has a different racial biological makeup. He has a different culture. These groups can be distinguished from each other. Now, in terms
mhm.
of, is it the culture that creates the behavior? Is it the culture that creates the low IQ? Is it the culture that creates the crime?
Nature versus nurture argument,
Yeah.
essentially, right?
Why I say it's nature, weebs, is because, sorry to call you weebs if
No,
that's
you're totally fine. I
okay,
don't mind.
cool.
Nicknames are in my wheelhouse.
Awesome, awesome. If we rewind the clock back pretty much as far as we can, and we observe sub-Saharan Africa before colonialization, before there was really any interaction between the sub-Saharans and the non-sub-Saharans, we'll notice that they basically didn't create anything. There was no great civilizations. There were no inventions that stand out in any sort of way. There was no artistic expression. There was no farming. There was no agriculture. They didn't build houses beyond one floor level. They didn't build boats. And if we compare them to the Neanderthals, and we know Neanderthals lived in the same timeline as humans, we coexisted. We actually mated with the Neanderthals.
Mhm.
Interesting fact: all sub-Saharan Africans in the world have Neanderthal DNA, except for the Australians, which are basically genetic copies of Africans. We all have Neanderthal DNA within us. So the fact that Neanderthals were actually more advanced than sub-Saharans in a lot of ways, artistic expression, advancements, tools that they were using. We know Homo sapiens outside of Africans mated with these Neanderthals, and obviously the Homo sapiens outside of Africa were more advanced too. And then we just have this pocketed, isolated group of sub-Saharan Africans which never ventured out, never created anything great, and I think that's really at the core of the issue, because anywhere post colonization or anywhere post interaction between these groups, the left could make the argument that, oh, it was evil white people holding blacks down. But if
Mhm.
we rewind the clock as far as we can, we'll observe that they didn't do anything when they were left to themselves to build something. And I believe they had a low IQ then, they have a low IQ now. And there's empirical data on that. I mean, people can't argue that blacks have a lower IQ. They just
Mhm.
cannot. They could only argue that it's because of systemic forces or white oppression that has resulted in this low IQ or criminal behavior. But I argue that no, this was existing way before. It always has and it always will be.
Well, now, since we know that most of sub-Saharan Africans basically lived in basically a mineral and rich, rich part of the world where a lot of what it is necessary, necessary to essentially thrive or at least survive as a species was kind of just there already. Does
Yes.
that does that play into the essentially the reason for why there wasn't any, innovation occurring
Oh,
during that
absolutely.
time span, maybe why there was no improvement in that respect.
Absolutely. They kind of had everything easy. They didn't have to deal with the cold, harsh conditions that the Europeans and other groups had to deal with. They didn't have to deal with traveling and figuring out and planning how to deal with all of these things. They had a lot of, um, uh, I guess, it just benefits, which ended up resulting in a group that didn't have to go through these hardships and therefore were just less evolved. In order for a species to evolve, it has to kind of go into a different environment or face some sort of external pressure which forces it to get to go beyond it. Life is essentially lazy. It's fine with what it can get, and it will
Mhm,
not evolve unless it's forced with some external condition which makes it go beyond.
mhm.
That's a whole conversation in and of itself, but that's
And
the
yeah, I find it very fascinating actually. I think I'm working on a series on IQ and I'm looking at the reasons, well, not IQ, but intelligence per se, and I'm looking at kind of the reasons as to why people might not be as smart as they can be, or why certain people in certain scenarios might not be as intellectually advanced as they should be when looking at general statistics and such.
Mhm, mhm. On an individual level, there's always gonna be outliers, always
Of
deviations
course.
from the
Oh,
norm.
of course.
Neil deGrasse Tyson's, Ben Carson's, these people will always pop up, and you'll always have a Yao Ming or a white guy who makes it into the NBA. But you're kidding yourself if you don't understand that these are deviations from the norm. In some cases, they're anomalies,
Hmm.
and I think by and large, there are very apparent, very noticeable, very clear differences between the races in their performance, in their behavior, the way that they conduct themselves by and large. I think that if the left really looks into history and is honest with themselves, they'll understand that yes, sub-Saharan Africans are essentially less evolved, and that might sound harsh, that might sound overcritical, but I really do believe that it's the truth. And there's somewhat of a ceiling that I believe that exists over the group as a whole, so that yes, certain individuals will pop through that ceiling, but it's unreasonable to believe that blacks will commit less crime, and it's unbelievable, or sorry, it's unreasonable to believe that blacks will start performing in school the same way that whites, Asians, and Jews do.
Okay, that's fair. I in my own opinion, under the banner of what it is that I know about society and the various races and their demographics and where it is that they stand intellectually, also where it is and how it is that they are educated, because we can concur that, let's be honest, black school districts, predominantly, black school districts, do not perform as well and do not have the necessary funding, especially in the public school setting due to the lack of funding that they suffer. I mean, if we were to bring it up to the same level funding wise, on as say a predominantly white school, um, then we could probably have a more accurate representation of what the difference is. But as of right now, I do believe that the results are skewed and made to look a little bit more disproportionate, um, just on that factor alone. I would be very curious as to see what and how far the difference is. If we could get a plethora of a sample size of black students and a sample size of white students. And I know it would never be exactly completely, unbiased or unskewed in a certain way, but we could get closer if we took them and we put them in the same school setting and see how they performed, you know, in that
Yeah,
respect.
it's very hard to get
It
such
is
a
very hard.
finite controlled experiment like that.
Exactly.
You know Jordan Peterson, right?
Yeah, I am. I do know him, but not gonna lie, I don't really watch a lot of his videos.
Right on. No,
Um,
I'm not a huge fan of him. I used to be more back in the day,
yeah.
but he has talked profusely about IQ and how it's essentially biological. It's an inherent trait that we pick up from our parents. He's talked about identical twin studies where if you separate twins, doesn't matter what age, chances are they're going to have basically the same IQ 20 years down the road. Doesn't matter what the economic conditions are. It's basically going to play out the same in most cases. I did a video where I debated this SJW on the street about race realism, and I include a little piece from a documentary that actually looks into that and looks at twins who have been separated and they test their IQ later down the road, and turns out it's basically a match. So yeah, there are epigenetic things that can happen in our lifetime that can change our phenotypical expression and our genotype, whatever, in what's going on internally.
Hmm.
For instance, I know two identical twins. One of them is slightly bald, the other one isn't. So there's things that happen within his life that has affected him on an epigenetic level, which now he has different expressions or whatever carrying out. So yeah, you can have maybe like a 5% change in IQ or 5 point difference in IQ or whatever. There are slight changes, but by and
Hmm.
large, it's more of a nature thing than a nurture thing. And Jordan Peterson, Stefan Molyneux, lots of people who are way more well researched in this than I am, will argue just that. So we could apply it to race and be like, we would have no reason to believe logically that if we just put blacks into white areas or blacks into white families or blacks into richer families or whatever, that it's going to have a big impact on their IQ level by and large.
Well, I actually did look at a study a few months ago, and this is in one of my videos, so I'll just kind of briefly go over it. There was a study done on urban versus suburban settings. Predominantly, of course, the urban setting was more of a colored persuasion than the suburban setting. So that made for an interesting look into the racial aspect of IQ. But it was done on, I believe it was 6 to 11-year olds. So once when they were 6 and once when they were 11 to see how their IQ changed. I think it was the Wechsler intelligence scale for children. I can't remember exactly this study, but they basically they looked at their IQ when they were 6 and then when they were 11. And for the suburban children, it didn't really fluctuate at all. But for the urban children, I believe it went down on average about 5 points from the age that they were 6 to the age that they were 11. So that does, it's very interesting to say the least, what it is that you can tell age range wise, race wise,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
just educationally based on because you have to also when you're looking at IQ tests, you have to look at what it is that they're testing for, or what it is that they're analyzing children with respect to. So, uh, processing, working memory, or processing speed, working memory. I don't know all of it off the top of my head because like I said, I'm not in school right now, so I'm not thinking about this stuff actively. I do have to get on it though. I have a video due coming out at some point in the next month on that subject. I am progressively making alternate conclusions and kind of learning as I go about this. Since it is my area of study, I'm trying to take it kind of slow and kind of looking at all aspects before I make my final conclusion on whether or not race is or IQ is determined solely on, or not solely, but a lot more on race than it is on where it is you come from and who it is that you're raised by and how it is that you're raised, because I do feel like a lot of nurture is contingent, and how much you use your brain is contingent, or your IQ is contingent on how much you use your brain and how you were raised or how you were brought up and what aspects you find more important. Like I said, I believe in taking self responsibility, and a part of that is in the decisions that you make. So how you improved yourself as a person and how you've worked to improve yourself as a person.
Right, right. I think in terms of like nature versus nurture, and how much these two things affect us, I think on if we look at it like through the lens of like long periods of times, long time spans, nurture is extremely power. Environmental conditions essentially form different species. It is an equally strong force as the biological one. However, within 1 or 2 generations, the environmental forces, nurture can only do so much. We can't get a chihuahua to turn into a German shepherd within a few lifetimes, but
Of
over a
course not.
long period of time, through selective breeding, we can achieve this. We can't change an animal within uh, you know uh, 1 or 2 generations just by throwing it into a new environment.
Hmm.
But there has been examples where they've imported, I believe it was some sort of butterfly, to a new region, and it developed a different mouth that was capable of eating bananas that it never had before. And it was one of the most profound observations within like our lifetime of seeing microforms of evolution. And of course, microevolution leads into macroevolution.
Hmm.
So how I'm going to tie this up is people will make the argument that essentially it's just nurture and nature that has caused the differences in subspecies, the differences in races, or what have you. And I'll sit there and say, okay, fine. Yeah, people, groups get separated large distances, they're isolated for large periods of time. It's the environment that causes these differences. However, after X amount of years, these differences are now noticeable and they're embedded into the biology of the species or subspecies or what have you. So, although, of course, it was the environment that created the differences between the races, those differences are still there after thousands of years, and now there's biological differences as a result of the environmental ones, and that's just how evolution works.
Well, I will say with regards to measuring to determine, what is what based on, you're making the comparison essentially, physical representations. You can see like you can actually tell butterfly differences physically over the generations, what is different versus what's not different. But internally, with your mind's capabilities, it's a little bit more difficult to measure that in that sense, especially with something as arbitrary and fluctuating, by the way, as an IQ test, because the IQ test, let's be honest, is not the same one that, you know, was the original IQ test. In what was it, the 1800s when they first formulated it. I
Yeah, I
do
have
read the chat,
no
Mr. Monkey Lint. We're having a discussion. It's impolite.
yeah, feel at any point in time if you want to take like a little break, like when you did with the super chats, I love that. No problem.
Well, if
Feel
I got any more I'm just kidding. Don't
yeah,
feel obligated, chat. You don't have to give me money. It's fine.
bring in the
I'm just
super
dicking with you.
chats. Support Weebo Jones. She's a smart girl. She's got a cool show. She's open minded. What else could you guys ask for, right?
Oh, I do
Um,
I do want to ask one question because we have like 15 minutes and this is probably this yeah, no, this is one of those more important questions. Um, are traps allowed in the ethno state?
Ooh, the Trapno State. The Trapno State. Oh fuck, that's a good one. I haven't figured out the SJW question when it comes to the ethno state. Like people have said to me, "What do you do about the SJWs that are white? What if they are proud to be white? Do they get in if they're transgender or fucking crazy feminist?" And I think based on the principles of an ethno state, we'd have to let them in. Like, how can you refuse somebody based on their political ideology if they fit in with everything that we're saying? You know what I mean? The main parts of what makes the alt right and wanting to create an ethno state, the origins don't lie, in hating transgenders or SJWs. It essentially lies in wanting to preserve the white race. That's essentially what we think is the most important thing. That's what we should be working on more than anything. So if that takes precedence, if that's at the high point in the priority structure, we need to honor that. And I would say, yeah, traps should be allowed. Do I necessarily want them to be? But on a technical grounds, they have to be.
Okay. Chaos Eve, thank you for the $2. If you want monies, dot dot dot. Thanks, Chaos. You don't have to donate, and I know you're probably going to just anyway to spite me because that's how you do. But seriously, guys, you don't have to donate. Totally fine with being a broke college student and going off to yeah, $5. Chaos Eve, thank you for the $5. Making it rain up in here, XD. Ha ha, very funny. Fuck you, but I love you too. Anyway, and yeah, no, okay. So ethnostate traps are allowed. Not that you want
Yeah.
them, but traps are allowed. Good to hear. Now
Yeah.
I can be let into the ethnostate.
Are there people out there that call you a trap, Weebo?
Yes. There are
Uh,
also people out there that call me a cave beast, a thought, what else am I? A coal burner, apparently.
Oh
Um,
wow.
a there are so many things. I am whatever the popular consensus of the week is. I think last week I was Mama Weebs or something. I don't know.
Mama Weebs.
Well, here's the thing: if you watch the Amos Yee debate, because I keep bringing it back to that, but bringing it back to that because well, it's a relatively new thing, so it's very interesting to me. But if you watch the Amos Yee debate, there's a point in that debate where essentially I go fucking mama on Amos's ass, and I'd be like, Amos, 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 if you want to have a discussion on this, I need to be able to voice my opinion before you start yammering yours. Do you understand? And he starts going off, and I'm like, do you understand? And then he starts doing, do you understand, Amos? And he's like, yeah,
Nice. You
because,
got you got to hold these people down, man. They'll just keep fucking talking. They'll keep interrupting you.
yeah.
There's no
Well, you have to understand, I've raised two kids already, and I'm only 20. I mean, like my little sister, my little brother. So it's kind of ingrained in me, this aspect of no nonsense mama type. Uh,
yeah.
I don't like to do it, but it's kind of sometimes necessary, which I think is what makes me such a good moderator for debates. Because I've moderated a few debates before, and I, I,
Hmm.
I
Would
let them kind of play out. But if things start getting a little bit ugly, I kind of like, gentlemen, cease, or I will
yeah.
cease it for you.
Would you ever be willing to moderate a debate for me?
Oh yeah, obviously, of course. Just set it up. Make sure you tell me what day it is that you guys are cool with doing it, and I will handle, the hosting, the moderating type stuff.
Yeah, that would be cool. That'd be really awesome. I think you'd be good at like just staying focused, understanding if we're going in circles, if the conversation needs to progress to a new area, if somebody's
Hmm.
dodging a question. I think that's the most important parts of a moderator when it comes to debate.
Oh yeah,
And yeah, you're obviously really smart, and you got a good camera and audio thing going on. You know what I mean?
I'm very happy about this mic.
Yeah, it's sounding buttery smooth.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um, um,
How's my mic sounding? Is it all right?
yeah, it sounds good,
All right, cool. Competing with that amazing mic setup there.
dude. This is a refurbished mic, by the way. So like, you don't have to pay the full $120 for a Blue Yeti. Get one refurbished. You didn't hear it from me.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I should look into that.
Absolutely, and they're so easy to use too. I just have to plug it in, and then this is the mute button if you want to just anything, and it'll flash if you're muted. And I know I just muted myself so you couldn't hear me, but that was the point. And then you can determine, like, you can use this for singing and stuff. You can use it for just interviews, one-way interviews, or if you want to, you can kind of turn it to it's a dual-sided thing, or it can be an omnidirectional microphone. It's great. And this is not a promotional, by the way. I'm reveling in how nice my microphone is that looks like a giant penis.
Fuck, it should be a commercial. It should be an advertisement. You should be getting paid right now.
No, that's fine. No, yeah, no. For all of those of you who say that it looks like a giant phallic thing, just kidding.
Little
And
treat for the fans out there.
I did. Okay, here's the thing. I did have it turned off the other day, and I didn't even notice, and that is on me.
Were you doing like a live stream with no audio?
No. I had audio because I had other headphones on that had a microphone on them attached to them, so I could still, talk and be heard. But I accidentally turned it off because I was trying to present a video for watching purposes to all of the other stuff, but I accidentally turned it off, or I turned it off on purpose, and then I left it off, and I forgot that I turned it off, and it was embarrassing because that's the second time that's happened to me on stream.
You can't let that happen again.
No,
Maybe
absolutely
have
not.
like a little note somewhere set up just reminding you every time.
Turn on the fucking mic, you dweeb.
I've literally had to do that before, like set up little notes to remind myself, whether
Yeah.
it's like to plug myself or whatever, plug myself. That sounds pretty fucking gay.
Yeah, I might be a redhead, quote unquote redhead, but I have my dumb blonde moments. Don't let me fool you. I might appear very smart when I talk, but I'm a fucking idiot.
We all have our fucking dumb moments for sure.
Oh my god. I
No,
could tell you stories. My boyfriend could tell you stories. My brother could, all of everyone I've ever met could tell you stories. Ranting Monkey could tell you a whole bunch of stories if you're familiar with his work. He's
no,
he's a very interesting YouTuber.
ranting
I'd
monkey.
recommend,
I'll make a little note of it.
checking out his content. Shameless creator endorsement right there, everybody. Um, he's got some interesting content. He doesn't like being wrong though, I will warn you. He prefers and he absolutely will insist that he is right all of the time.
That can be annoying, but it can also be very entertaining.
Oh yeah.
You have like a love-hate relationship with bringing those people on.
I do have a love-hate relationship with Ranting Monkey because, and this is an inside joke. And we're not going to remind him of this joke while we're here, gentlemen. Do you understand me? He has a tendency to pretend that he is going to have sex with my grandmother.
Okay, okay. Why would he want to pretend that he's gonna have sex with your grandmother? Why?
Because
Why
it
your
pisses
grandmother?
me off. Apparently, he wants to work down my family line just for shits and giggles. And he's married too, by the way. So it's like, Lady Monkey, control your husband, please and thank you.
Lady monkey.
Yeah. No, no, his wife is actually pretty like in on the YouTube scene as well. She doesn't do videos, but she hops in chat. She's got her own account. She's got her own Twitter. Their relationship is interesting. We're good friends, so I'm a little bit biased. But yeah,
I gotta check. What's his name again? Reading monkey.
Ranting Monkey.
Ranting monkey.
Yeah. And I'm actually here's the thing, we're actually competing for views right now because he's got his own live stream that he does every weekday and Saturday night from like 8 to 10 Central Time. Yeah, that's what
Is that
time zone I'm in.
is that your preferred time slot?
I don't have a preferred time slot. My show happens usually. Okay, so I have a weekly show on Saturdays. Not this week and not next week though, because I will be in Greece. But I have a weekly show on Saturdays from 10 to 12 Central Time. Friday show that's the shiterature readings, the cringe readings of fan fiction. That's not your speed. It's ooh, that's well, the time is arbitrary, but like it's in the afternoon, so after you get off work, whatever. Um, those are the only two streams that I normally do. Sometimes I'll do debate streams, so I did one on Sunday night, and then we're doing this, so this is kind of random. I think I'm doing a morning stream tomorrow, just for patrons though. I got a lot of streaming to do before I go to Greece.
Yeah, it seems like you got a busy schedule on the go.
Oh yeah,
Well,
all of the
thank
time.
you. Thanks for having the time to squeeze me in there and to get me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and I'd definitely love to have you on the channel again sometime, whether it be for just another discussion like this, or we debate, or I get you on for Chaos 120 as a guest. That'd be so much fun. I think
Yeah,
you'd have a lot of interesting camaraderie with the rest of the hosts on that night.
yeah. I mean, when I tuned in, you guys seemed all to be very chill. Like that was the first thing I noticed. These guys
Hmm.
seem like they're just a cool group of guys to hang around with and shoot the shit with.
Oh
And not
yeah,
only that, but like when you actually have something of substance to bring to the table, when you have a host and a good channel, it's just all the more inviting. So
oh
when you
yeah,
said, "Hey, yeah, I'll shoot you the link. You want to come on?" I couldn't that night because my girlfriend was sleeping and I had to keep it down and shit. I'm like,
yeah,
I want to.
understandable.
So yeah, no, this has been really cool, and I'd love to come
Hmm.
on again, and
Oh
maybe we
yeah,
could I could get you as a moderator either on my channel or I could come on here, kind of like
whatever
network
works
and
for you,
promote.
dude. I'm game. I'm down.
Wicked, wicked.
I'm very flexible.
And I had a moment there just to actually check out the chat. I was interested. I'm like, God, for all I know, these people are calling me like a white supremacist, literally Hitler,
Oh
or
no, the,
I
the
have
chat's
no
behaving.
idea. Yeah, and it seemed like everybody's really cool, adding some insightful comments as well
Hmm.
as little mini conversations there too. So,
Yeah.
guess yeah, thanks to everybody in the chat for being open minded to listen to a white nationalist. Um, kind of ranting about crazy things.
Yeah. And actually, at one point, they were having a completely separate discussion than what we were having. I can't remember what it was, but they were not talking about what we were talking about.
That always happens. It's
Yeah, it
hilarious.
does.
It's so funny. Anytime I'm doing my own stream or whatever, and I check in with the chat, and like they're going off about Andrew Scheer, this guy from the Conservative Party here in Canada.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're talking about Islam. You know, two totally
Mhm.
irrelevant conversations, but it's great to see that kind of happen organically within another topic.
Mhm. I appreciate you, chat, and I appreciate you, Ronnie. Thank you for coming on, and we have like less than a minute, so I'm gonna, do my thing, with
Cool.
the signing out type stuff. So thank you, Ronnie, for coming on, and again, I will have you on at some point later in the future just to shoot the shit or whatever it is you want to do. So that's all up to you. We'll talk in DMs. Yeah.
Wicked. Thanks so
Um.
much for having me on, Weebo. I had a great time. It was an excellent conversation.
Oh
If you
yeah.
guys want to follow me, I can subscribe to ProperGander TV on YouTube. As well, I have a website, ronniecameron.com. You guys can check it out if you want to be a subscriber to it. That would be great. I'd appreciate it.
All right, and chat. Thank you for coming out again. Thank you for behaving yourself, also, and future viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation that we've had. If you have any input, feel free to leave it in the comments section after the stream is over. Anything. I read all of my comments, by the way. I might oh, oh, oh. My alarm clock's going off. It's saying it's 10 o'clock. That means we have to kill the stream now. Yeah, no, I read all my comments. So if you got anything to say, by all means, say it to me in the comments. Anyway, peace, bye, love y'all. And